Super Saturday by-elections here, bringing our panel of strategists, Grahame Morris and Bruce Hawker. Very good afternoon to you, and I'm very keen to hear your take a day or two on from these by-election results. Grahame, why did we see the results that we did on Saturday night?
What can I say? The first good thing about the by-election results is that Bill Shorten will lead the Labor Party in the next election. That's the good thing for the coalition. They don't have to worry about Anthony Albanese.
Why is that a good thing given? Because
you don't have to pre-program everything and start from scratch and trying to work out how you deal with Anthony Albanese. The result in Braddon was actually very good, and it means all of those Tasmanian seats are in play. The Queensland one wasn't good. And it's a mixture. I genuinely think the first thing to do for the Prime Minister and the team is to get the nervous Queenslanders into a room and say, guys, what do you think we ought to be doing? Because I think we need a special Queensland strategy. Yes, you can say, look, the candidate had triggered problems. The coalition didn't get anywhere near the preference swap from Pauline Hanson that they had hoped for, and the polls were ridiculous in the first place. But even allowing for that, the 4% two-party preferred swing, that's about average. But the primary vote
is the problem.
Because,
Grahame, the Ryan by-election, which plenty in the government publicly today are saying, it's no worse than the Ryan by-election. This was back in 2001. Howard government was in. It had a shocker in Ryan in Queensland. The two-party result was a lot worse than what we saw in Longman. The primary vote, though, wasn't as bad as what we've seen in Longman. But what did the Howard government do in response to then go on and win an election not long after?
Well, just before Ryan, the Prime Minister smelled the water, and he didn't smell very good. And he adjusted things like petrol excise, which were starting to... The price of petrol was starting to concern everybody.
Froze excise.
Then around budget time, there was some money for first home buyers. There were quite a few policy changes that had to be done, and it made all the difference.
So there's something, I'm not saying the same response, but there needs to be some, you say, sit down with the Queenslanders. I think that's an excellent idea.
That's the first thing.
Yeah.
And just because they're the nervous ones, and you just got to walk them through. Groom, Isaac... Rangamite Morton, all of those sort of... The Oxley by-election... The Oxley by-election was 11% swing against the government, and Hawke still won. The Adelaide by-election, 8% swing, still won. This one is 4%, and Braddon, blame me, was no percent. So all of those Tasmanian seats are back in play. But I think there are a number of people who have to just have a bit of a think about what are you doing about the One Nation stuff? What are you doing about a special Queensland package? And overall, I think there's a few things in policy side that are going to be very awkward.
What are those?
Might have to change.
What are those? Company tax?
One of them, I will take Matthias Cormann's advice on this, but I suspect that the government probably ought to say to Matthias, let's have one more go in the Senate, and it may well be that you can negotiate a different ceiling. But after that, if it still goes down and the Senate knocks it off, then it's no good being the most responsible opposition in history if you are in opposition. But, and Bruce will understand this, it has to be explained well in advance why you would be changing the policy, because Kevin Rudd did it on environment overnight and shocked everybody and with no explanation. Yeah. But if you're going to change it, it's got to be because the Senate wouldn't let us. It's the wrong time. In a decade, it might be different. But I think it probably has to be adjusted because it is sucking all the oxygen out of the opposition's, out of the government's message, and it's giving Bill Shorten a big hammer to belt the PM with.
Bruce, is there any danger for Labor that it simply looks at the results across the board on Saturday night and says, great, we know what to do, we'll stick with the exact same approach come election time? Is that what you'd be advising, or are there lessons along the way that should be learnt by Labor?
Well, it all depends on what the government's response to the results are. If they do nothing about banking, for example, and the tax for companies, then Labor has got a very solid policy that can continue to run with, hospitals and health before banks. That's a very powerful slogan that will actually resonate with electorates in Queensland. And it's not just Queensland MPs from the Liberal side and the National side who should be worried about these results from the weekend. It's every member of the government, because if they can't win Queensland, there's no way they're going to win the election. They're already up against it with the sort of swings we're seeing in places like Western Australia. If Queensland goes the way Longman went the other night, then it's all over Red Rover. That's why there's so much nervousness in the ranks of the government now. That's why we're hearing people in the Queensland branch of the Liberal Party starting to make noises. And that's why you get the usual suspects like Alan Jones and Andrew Bolt and all the others coming out and saying that, that the Prime Minister's time's really up, because they don't see him as having anything but a tin ear when it comes to issues involving the big end of town. It's not a good sort of image.
And do you agree with that, Bruce? Do you think there's a problem for Malcolm Turnbull in Queensland?
Oh, I think there's a huge problem for him there. It's worse in Queensland than it is, say, in Sydney. We know that from research. But in the outlying states like Queensland and Tassie and Western Australia, there is a strong sense that this man is out of touch with the real pressing needs of people in regional Australia particularly. He just doesn't resonate well with them. He's inauthentic and he's a problem. And that's why hardheads like Alan Jones and others are now starting to say, well, is he really the choice? Their problem, of course, is that there is no real alternative to him. They put up Tony Abbott and what votes you pick up from One Nation in regional areas you'd lose in the city because he's so unappealing to people in suburban and inner city cities. So that's the problem.
But as Tony Abbott himself says, it's not about so much the leader. It needs to be a good look at the policy approach here as well. Graham, Tony Abbott's laid out today the solutions he sees: pull out of the Paris Agreement, cut migration, and fix the problem with the Catholic schools. Do you disagree with any of that?
Yeah, I've heard that before. If Queensland particularly and One Nation stuff, I think there is something that the community is starting to be very uneasy about immigration levels. There's almost 500,000 people came in last year, and you start to think, well, the first thing about immigration policy is to make sure the rest of the country accepts it. And I think we're getting to the stage where the people are not accepting it. And maybe there ought to be another look at immigration levels. You don't need a blinking inquiry, just sort of cut the thing.
Oh,
what was the other one? Hang on. The Catholic thing I sort of understand. The Catholics are always whinging for more money, but there's something there that is making enough people a little bit uneasy, because the government rightly said, well, look, all you Catholic people, here's all the money, you decide, and take some money off the wealthy ones and give it to the less wealthy ones. But, nobody seems to like that, so maybe they've got to have a look at that one too. So I would think tax after Matthias has had a real red-hot go again. Immigration, something to do in that sort of Catholic area, and probably a couple of other things. And you just say, we've heard the message. It's causing us some pain, but here we go again.
And best case scenario, sort out the energy debate with the states, and sort of push that to one
Well,
side.
I think Josh Frydenberg might be on the track with that one.
Yeah. Sorry, Bruce, you were just going to make a quick comment there.
Just on One Nation and immigration. Look, it's true that is a big issue for One Nation. It's not necessarily true that for people who are drawn to One Nation that it is the number one issue. The number 1, 2 and 3 issues for people who are tending away from the large parties to the independents and One Nation are cost of living, health and resources, in the sense that they're being left behind. Immigration's in that mix, but it's not front and centre for most of them. If it was, then I think we would have seen a much better result for the government in Longman on Saturday night, because people were pushing it from the Liberal side. There's no doubt about that. But it just didn't really ring true as being the big issue that was worrying them. These people are doing it tough in electorates like Longman, and they just don't feel that it's fair when the big end of town is going to get a $70 billion tax benefit, and they're not going to see that going into health and education and other services and benefits that they think that they should be getting. That's a simple message for Labor to push, and it resonates because it's essentially true. And that's the problem that the government's got. If Turnbull doesn't change his approach, then it's going to be difficult for him. If he does change his approach, if it looks like it's reflexive and insincere, which was the problem that Kevin Rudd had, then it's going to be a badly received message as well. I think Turnbull's in for a world of pain whatever way he goes on these issues.
Well, I think Graham's idea of at least starting with a meeting with all the Queenslanders is not a bad place to start and get some discussion going amongst the troops. We've got to go. We'll see how that all plays out over the coming weeks. Bruce, Graham, thank you. Catch up soon.
See you, David.
Quick break.